What's up, y'all? Sparta here. What I want to do is what I've seen a lot of lately on a lot of channels that I follow in regards to headphone reviews. Now, this isn't like something that I want to, I'm just copying or anything like that, but it's just something I more want to do because I was interested and I wanted to test the 10P1, for example. I already did a short tape review. And since between then and now, these have definitely gotten better and have become my favorite my favorite IEM so far in terms of what they can do. The phone doesn't want to focus. That's something I do indeed say the OnePlus 6T does better. There we go. There we go. It's weird. But but yeah, let's talk about this here. So 10P1. Very funny that they're called the P1s and they're shaped like a P, right? But the reason they're called the P1s is because they have a planar magnetic driver in there. So I'm not going to get into like super specifics as to what that does. Different drivers play with sound in specific ways and are better for and are and are better for certain scenarios and certain music and stuff like that. Depending on who you are, right? If that's your opinion on something, and you like say just a regular like earphone with a dual dynamic drivers and stuff like that. Basically, what everything is on the market. Most things that are cheaper are on the market right now, and stuff like that, and that's fine. It just depends on what you like. But these two do things in different ways that I definitely do want to talk about. These are electrostatic, and they also have a I forget what the god dang. They have a dynamic driver, I believe, in there for bass, and it really does show too. And that's something that I did talk about in my initial review, but it has indeed gotten better with the music I've listened to over time. Burn in is something that the audio headphone enthusiast community tends to be, a bit wishy washy over. Sometimes people are like, you have to burn in headphones, otherwise they just don't sound great. Other people are like, oh, burn in doesn't really matter and stuff like that. But for me, these really showed what burn in can do for a set of IEMs in particular, especially these. What burn in is basically it's just letting these get used to actually being used. They've been sitting in a box for like what a while, and headphone places tend to not to put them through a whole bunch of audio tests to make sure that they are burned in when you get them out the box and stuff like that. They just tend to just tune them, put them in the box, make sure everything in terms of QA is nice, the design is right, nothing is broken, and they just send it in the box. And that's pretty much it. And that's totally fine. I'm not necessarily saying companies should have to do that. They should at least make sure they work, which is what matters. But, whatever. So both of these have MMCX connectors. They're detachable. You can swap these out if you want. And mainly what is nice about having a cable that's detachable is that typically the cable is what goes bad in a headphone. It's not necessarily the headphone itself. And it's nice to have the option to just take them off when you feel like it and swap it out with a better cable if you want. I will say, out of both of these cables, I do like the tapes cable a bit more. The Samsung's camera is super bad with colors, so you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell, but it's more of a copperish look on both of these. They're copper cables, and both of them are very nice woven. But what I do like about this is that due to the fact that it terminates technically to 2.5, but has a 3.5 adapter in the box. You put it in, Never take it off, and it's totally fine, and it becomes a longer cord, and it's a nice cord as well. This also has shielding right here as well. If I could find where the shielding ends. um, oh, it's quite long in terms of. Come on, quite long in terms of where the shielding starts and ends. So that's very nice. The P1s, fuck it, don't have any sort of shielding right here. So whatever. It's not necessarily the biggest deal in the world. Both of these loop around your ears, so they'll just they'll be able to stay in your ear a bit better. What I will say, the P1s are worse at in terms of, not necessarily sound, but, fit and finish. These have quite a bad seal. Even if you switch out your tips, which is what I did, and they don't necessarily stay in your ear all that great, so you can't necessarily get the best sound, and the isolation won't be as good. But if you can get them in your ear good enough, they'll stay in and they'll be totally fine. But if you're one of those people that like to put them in your ear just to have isolation, the tapes definitely are the better of the two of the two in terms of that. So let's talk about sound. Typically, what I do is, in particular, I have a list. I have a playlist on Google Play Music of like all the tracks I like to use in terms of listening to music and stuff like that. It's literally right here called Headphone Test. So I go in here. I typically don't play these tracks here really unless I really want to see how they feel. These are just from my main storage, but I've added a couple just to have a little bit of diversity. I mainly have hip hop and rap in here. So Sweet Leaf, Black Sabbath, Metallica, Fade to Black, Man Eater, which is a song I do want to talk about, for example, solely. And the rest basically is just rap. Because that's what I listen to, it's what I was raised off of. But yeah. So I want to talk in particular about what both of these do well. But let me talk about, before that, the amount of volume these have. Now, I would not advise you to run these off of a phone. Since these are planar headphones or IEMs, they require power. Even on like my LG G8 or my V20, it gets loud enough, but it's not like to the point where I'm satisfied really. But what I was able to hear, and it gets loud, it gets pretty loud, but the difference is you can't necessarily really hear it. I'll give you guys an example here real quick. So I'll play The Learning by Mobb Deep. As you guys can hear, they're pretty loud. Like, it's not terrible. Like, it sounds pretty loud. And when I put them in my ear, let me make sure I put them in right. Yeah, they're loud enough. I wouldn't necessarily say they're the best in terms of giving you a lot of volume. But what I do indeed think is the highlight here is what they do with sound, right? Sound on these are really nice. Like, planars are really particular for a particular set of people. They're not necessarily for everybody. But what I would definitely say here is sounds on here sound really nice. A lot of sounds sound like natural. They don't necessarily say you get a $20 pair of headphones from like Target or something, right? They'll get the job done temporarily and then they'll crap out on you. What these do is left and right panning and stuff like that, having certain sounds in one ear and certain sounds in the other, it doesn't sound overbearing. It doesn't sound like you're gonna be overwhelmed by the amount of like sounds that are going from left and right. And the Learning by Mobb Deep is definitely a song I would highlight in that regards, where there's a lot of sound on the left and sounds on the right, and it just hits you with that sort of like impact, right? And that's a very nice way, I would say, to demo that kind of thing. And its bass is decent. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best bass, especially if you compare it to the tape. The tape, like, it's having a separate driver for bass does something. And it definitely helps the tapes in that regard. But the P1s aren't terrible. It totally depends on the song. If you listen to like a lot of different hip hop and stuff like that, in particular, like say Tupac, I don't think these will necessarily be great. But nonetheless, for stuff like other stuff in my library, like say Sweet Leaf, Fade to Black and stuff like that, they're really good in terms of giving you those kind of sounds and making them sound really nice. Like Sweet Leaf starts off with this like cough that goes from the left and then it fills in on both sides and it sounds really nice on both. But I think personally it sounds a bit better on the P1s. What else? Like I said, bass isn't necessarily the best on these for me personally. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a bass head, but I do like a good amount of satisfying bass. And for what these do, the bass is satisfactory. I give it like a B in that regard. They're not necessarily like great. But let's go to the tapes and compare. Okay, so what the tapes do, and these are, and what I like about Android 10 on the G8, when you when you unplug a pair of headphones and replug them back in, it doesn't reset your volume back to 50 like it used to do. Like, that's the one thing I hated about, like, it's kind of a gripe with using the V20 to like that I was using to burn my like P1s in, was the fact that every time I would unplug them then plug them back in, oh, it's down to 50 again. But yeah, as you guys can probably hear, they're louder. They're definitely louder. And that's something that I would say is a highlight of these. But at the same time, what another highlight is, and it's what I've stated already, is that the bass, is fantastic on these. I go to Parking Lot Pimpin' from Jay-Z. Now these the highlight of the tapes. And these really benefit from putting different tips on it. These tips don't necessarily help with bass. They're more analytical, I guess. And the bass is definitely still there and you still hear it. It's still satisfying. But what the tapes do, resolution and definition. So these are probably as clear as like my Sennheiser HD 650s, if not a bit more. Like they sound really clear. Vocals, let me make sure I don't start a song and get copyrighted despite the fact that I'm not making money off this video. God, overexposing yet again. But what the tapes do is that vocals sound really clear. you don't hear any sort of like fringing. You don't hear any sort of popping or distortion or anything like that. These are really good if you want a good, satisfying amount of bass and not have that get drowned out. And like I said in my last review of these, comparing them to like more the TRN V90s, bass is really satisfying on these as well, while also giving you a good amount of vocal clarity. It's very nice to see and hear that it's almost as if you're in the studio listening to, like, for example, Jay-Z spit this for the first time or whatever, fully, completely, and stuff like that. That's what this feels like when you have these in your ear. The tapes have a good amount of resolution as well. They are clear, but they lack that sort of like, they lack a bit of crispness that the tapes have. The P1s are still good in that regard, but what I would definitely say is get a dedicated, a dedicated DAP, and say maybe an external DAC, and then that is known for its power, and really drive these hard. I hope the LG V60 really puts in like, say, a better amp, like if this had, say, maybe 25 more stops on like the volume, these probably would be as they probably would be very loud, and I'd be totally satisfied with how they sound. Because in terms of the details and the minutia, these are great. These are very good. And if you don't mind it not being overbearingly loud, and you have, say, an LG G8 V20 through V40, or V20 through V50, or you're getting the V60, I would definitely say that this phone, this phone and those other phones I named off definitely drive these well enough to where I'd be like, yeah, I can definitely hear why people love these. But I would say that, but as I said, they're not gonna be great for rap, like hip hop, especially if it's more bass heavy hip hop. It's not gonna. It's gonna sound like it has a bit less life than, say, the tapes. Both of these are around the same price too. These were $130. I think these were $170, $180 after taxes and all that crap. And I got both of these off Amazon. So these are really nice in terms of that. But yeah, let me know what you guys. Sorry, I stuttered there. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about this. I do want to do more headphone reviews. I just got to get more in the mode of doing it, obviously, because this is not something I typically do. I just want to give you guys more content. This is Sparta. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for support. Hope you guys have a wonderful Saturday, whatever time of day it is in your area. And be safe out there. Obviously, this health situation is going on right now. So, yeah. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it, share with people that are interested, and comment down below what you think, and have a good one.